Hello, my name's Graham. I'm the vicar here at St Peter's in Cringleford, bringing this week's 3-minute thought. 3 minutes to look at our Bible passage from Sunday and how we might be able to live our lives looking at it. So this week, we get the continuation of the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus feeds 5,000 people, plus some more, with the help of his disciples. And then he sends the disciples away over the lake in a boat and says that he'll catch them up later. He dismisses the crowds. He goes up to pray for a bit. He comes down and he keeps his word. He catches the disciples up. But though they are rowing across the lake, Jesus simply walks across the water to them. Now, understandably, when they see him coming, they get rather freaked out by it. But Peter says, "Look, Lord, if it's you, let me come to you." And so Jesus says, "Come on then, Peter." And Peter takes a step onto the sea, and then another. But then he sees the wind all around him and the waves it's lashing up, and his courage fails. He starts to sink beneath the water. But in that moment, he cries out the simplest prayer I think it's possible to cry. Certainly, I think it was the first prayer that I ever prayed. "Lord, save me." And Jesus rescues him, puts him in the boat, and then everyone is amazed and worshipped him. Now, there's so much we can get out of that very short passage. Firstly, we often think that if we follow what Jesus says, if we are good people, good Christians, then life will go swimmingly. And yet we see something of the truth in this passage, where the disciples follow what Jesus said, follow his commands, and go straight into the wind, straight into the storm. See, what we see in this passage, it is not so much that following Jesus will keep you out the storm, but that actually Jesus follows us into the storm. That he is there when the wind is howling. In fact, he turns up and he says, when they see him, he says, "Have courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." See, Jesus turns up in the middle of the disciples wondering where they're going to go next, how they're going to get through this storm, through the hard work, and says, "It is I." A great claim that he is God himself, walking on the waters, as the prophet Job said he would. And in the midst of all this, we see that in our lives, whether as individuals, as a church, as a world, we will always have these storms that come along. However much we want to follow Jesus and however closely we follow his paths, yet in the midst of those storms, he says the same things to us. With his presence there with us, he simply says, "Have courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." So wherever you are today, however much storms may be howling around you, remember that in Jesus Christ we have someone who is there with us. And we are called, because of that, to take heart.